What is good, NIO family? It's Rey-Jay back with another video, and in this one, I'm going to be talking about the one and only NIO stock, what you should be looking after for the future. I'm also going to break down why on earth tomorrow is going to be an absolutely massive day for the markets as we have the big FOMC meeting. So I'm going to break down how on earth this may end up affecting NIO, what's also going on with earnings for tomorrow, and how the share prices of the market and NIO as a whole can be affected by all of these pieces of news. I'm also going to break down what's going on with NIO's Twitter page as we still have some very bullish things coming out for the long-term future that still make me very excited despite what's going on right now. And before I break down anything about what's going on with the Fed and also for NIO stock, I do have to mention a couple of things before starting real quick. I'm not a financial planner. Don't take any of this as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please smash the like button if you want to see more videos like this. And not only benefits me, it benefits the entire NIO community as a whole. And the last things, if you guys can, please check out the Moomoo link down below and in the description. If you sign up for Moomoo, the link down below, and deposit $100 into the account, you're guaranteed 10 free stocks, each worth up to $2,500. And you can always sell these 10 free stocks for cash and use that cash to buy some NIO shares for free. This is a limited time offer. It ends in just 6 days, so please check it out before they run out. With that out of the way, let's get on with the video. So NIO was down about 1.5% for the day. I did predict that 19 would hold us for some time, but I did think we would actually test the high 18s for some time too. Now we did end up closing at 19.04, which is very close to what I predicted would happen. And we are a little bit green in the after hours. Now, when it comes to NIO, overall the volume is not that great. We are seeing the volume kind of decreasing, but overall the whole market is kind of in a very similar boat. So the volume isn't very strong, and the whole market is collectively taking a hit, which is anchoring NIO down. You can see Microsoft is kind of down, whether it's Redbox or Tesla or other big tech stocks, they all are taking a bit of a hit, and this is affecting NIO. Now, why is this happening? Well, it's because a lot of people don't want to risk their money before the FOMC meeting, which is actually, we had the first one today in a closed board meeting, but tomorrow we have the bigger meeting. Tomorrow on the 27th, this is when the big meeting is going to come, and this is when the Fed is going to announce their changes to monetary policy. So in essence, the markets are essentially getting ready for that 75 basis point rate hike, but 100 basis points is not out of the question just yet. And there is going to be a lot of pressure on Jerome Powell for how he ends up addressing inflation. If we actually look, I think right over here at this article, we could see that the Fed's Powell is in the hot seat right now as he stares down inflation in a very important week for the economy. So a lot of eyes are going to be on Jerome Powell. The whole markets, millions of people all over the world are going to be watching what on earth he's going to do. And right now, the markets have priced in essentially a 75 basis point rate hike, and there's essentially a 75% chance we actually get that, and a 25% chance it ends up being 100. So 100 basis points is still a possibility, and this is where you need to be prepared for what is to come. So tomorrow at 2 o'clock p.m. Eastern time, you can see the time is right here. That's when we're going to have the FOMC meeting starting. So during this time, I expect crazy volatility from the markets. In fact, we may actually see a big drop during this time because when Jerome Powell ends up speaking, when Powell says things, the market tends to move. Now, what I want to talk about that's very important is, look, we priced in most of what would happen during a 75 basis point rate hike. So if we get that 75 basis point hike, the market does have some potential to actually push up afterwards, and we could get a pretty nice close for the market, a nice push up. However, if we get 100 basis points, which is very unlikely, but it is still possible, the market is probably going to tank. Now, in essence, we can't just look at this from a daily basis. For the long-term markets, this is actually going to be very interesting because 75 basis points right over here, this would be okay for the markets. It would be pretty good. It would address inflation while the Fed won't be as hawkish. But if we get 100 basis points for the short term for the markets, this will not be good. The market will take a hit. But for the long term, for the next few months, the market will recover faster if the Fed is even more hawkish sooner. So we're most likely going to get this, though, a 75 basis point hike. And I do think the market is most likely going to see a bit of a bounce tomorrow after it comes. But I can't really guarantee that because it depends on how the market responds. When it comes to earnings, we also have, I believe, Meta kind of announcing their earnings, not to mention another company like Ford. So that's going to be in the after hours. That should not affect us as much. I think Shopify is announcing their earnings too during the hours. So be on the lookout for that. And so far, earnings have been a lot better than expected for a lot of stocks, but in particular, some of them are actually not meeting all expectations, such as Alphabet and Microsoft. If you look at Microsoft, we saw earnings. They had a $2.23 earnings per share versus $2.29, which was what was expected, and they didn't actually meet expectations there. They missed by a little bit, and revenue is at 51.9 billion. I just rounded that compared to the 52 billion, which is what would have been expected. They actually missed on that as well, just by some margin. So we're starting to see some big tech stocks kind of missing out on earnings. And this is typically what happens during recessions as we're seeing demand slow down. So this is a sign that what the Fed is doing is working, because right now demand in real estate, demand for mortgages, demand across the US is starting to drop a bit. And that is a good sign, because this means inflation will most likely start to drop soon. And the next PCE report should be pretty good too, not to mention CPI. And for the future, I really hope this trend continues and we start to see inflation drop. I hope that what we just saw from inflation was the peak, the 9% that we got. I don't know if that's going to be guaranteed, but as of right now, I hope for that. So that's a good sign. So for NIO, what does this mean for NIO going forward? Right now, NIO is holding that $19 support pretty well, but we are starting to show some weakness and actually breaking below it. Let me actually go a little bit back here. You could see NIO had some moments where we dropped down to 18.78. So we did end up touching the 18s again, like I predicted. And the overall market is seeing similar trends. Now, what else is very interesting though is a lot of stocks, they kind of dumped, or like they took a big drop and they kind of gapped down. I don't know if NIO's chart is showing a similar move. We're not really seeing the gap down like other stocks are. But if I went into like Tesla, for example, you could see, if I bring up like the 5-minute chart, kind of zoom out, we could actually look right here and we'll see there's a gap down that started us when we were dropping. If we look at other stocks out there, very similar trends were throughout the market, which is an indication that the market might get a bounce relatively soon. I'm not saying the market's just going to rally to all-time highs, but it might actually get a pretty decent move tomorrow if we get a decent report and if the markets actually respond positively. So now the SPY has this gap up here. I don't know if this gap is going to get filled tomorrow. I think it's less likely for that to happen. I think the market's going to be pretty choppy, but we might get a nice bounce a little later after the big FOMC report. So to me, that's essentially what I'm looking out for, a bounce. Do I think NIO is going to bounce? I don't truly know. It really depends on the Fed. But it's more likely that the market's going to trade kind of sideways, be kind of choppy, drop down a bit. NIO is probably going to test the high 18s again. And then once we get closer to about 2 o'clock p.m. Eastern time, I think NIO and the whole market are going to tank as we get closer to the start of this meeting right over here. And then once we have the FOMC meeting, if Jerome Powell is like speaking, the market's going to just be swinging like crazy. It's going to be very insane. And then if he announces a 75 basis point hike, it's more likely the market might get a positive reaction to that, in my opinion. The market might start to push up. NIO might end up actually closing a little bit green tomorrow if that's the case. If Powell surprises us and he gives us that 100 basis point hike, the whole market's going to tank. NIO is going to be back in the 18s most likely, and that's what you really have to look out for. So is this the end of the world? Not necessarily, but it is something to really be prepared for. We're either going to get 100 basis points or 75. 75 would allow a potential bounce for the markets. 100 will not allow that, in my opinion. I think we're most likely going to see a big rug pull if we get 100 basis points. Now, it's very unlikely. It seems more likely NIO and the whole market are going to get a bit of a bounce. So that's essentially what I'm looking out for. Now, the last thing I wanted to talk about is, we have a lot of earnings coming out, so be ready for those as well. Particularly on Thursday, I think we have Amazon with their earnings, and I think we also have another company like Apple as well, and Roku and Intel. So a lot of big things are going to happen on Thursday too. It's going to be another big day for the markets, not to mention the GDP report. So even if we get a bit of a bounce I'm not too confident about us kind of, holding the line for much longer because it's very dependent on the data as well. So Thursday is going to be another big day too. Be prepared for that. As far as what's going on with NIO's Twitter page, NIO tweeted this right over here because we can see something very interesting. So the exterior of the NIO ES7 showcases NIO's latest design language with reductive lines and powerful proportions. It is also the first SUV application of the design for ad ethos. So once again, very, very cool design that NIO has. In my opinion, I think NIO is doing a fantastic job fundamentally. I think their management is improving as well. So give them time as they expand to other countries, as the market starts to recover. NIO is going to recover with them. So it's just a game of patience. Until then, I expect more choppy price action. Tomorrow, I don't know if I can predict tomorrow. It really depends on the market. Like I said before, if we get that 75 basis point hike, I do think NIO might get a bounce from the crazy volatile price action. We could actually push up to the green. If we get 100 basis points, the market is most likely going to be red. NIO is probably going to tank with the markets because that's the Fed being even more aggressive. And for the short term, yes, that's going to be worse for the markets, the stock market. For the long term, it's going to be better because we'll have a quicker recovery. So that's essentially what I'm seeing from this point. With that said and done, I very much encourage you to keep your eyes out if you can for what Jerome Powell says. Watch the meeting if you guys can. This is going to be very important for the markets, and it's going to be huge, especially during this time when we saw inflation that high. With that said and done, thank you all so much for listening. Please be ready for tomorrow. It's going to be a huge day, and I'll see you guys in the next one. NIO to the moon, because the long-term future is amazing, and peace out.